Yes.
Just give me the word, so.
How would that be used in communication?
It looks that way, it's good that it's warm stuff.
And then there are counters are B2B, B2C, B2B and B2C, and the fourth one, something else. But now this session is about market communications.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not just focusing on
You can say after the call.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have like one meeting for a couple of people.
First, you have to say something.
You can just say it now. And then you don't need to talk anything, we just say, and nothing will have to call. And then now just press the button.
Okay. Okay. Yes, hello. Welcome back from the coffee break. My name is Gert Hansen, coming from the Danish EBA. I shall chair this session about market communication and PEF. This figure here should illustrate that PEF is still in the childhood, maybe in the beginning of the teen years. As a teenager, it shall find out where shall it go in the future. This is my way to try to describe this product policy landscape, where we have PEF. We shall see how can it in the future contribute to, we have talked about eco-design directive, we have how can it play together with GPP and eco-labeling and other tools. What we will deal with here now, that is, we will try to focus a bit on market communication. And before we go to the session, we will have a short pull. We'll have a 1 minute to put in the pull, and then we will start on the session.
Okay, so it's the same style as last time. Go to Slido, and you have about a minute to answer this simple question, so that we get a better idea in what you think about when it comes to PEF and market communication. Thirty seconds left. Ten. 5. And that's it. All right. Right.
Thank you. That is a very interesting result, I'll say. As far as I know, the Commission is planning to go business to business, but here there seems to be a strong commitment also to go business to consumer. So it's going to be interesting. What? Not Torben Clausen. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So is this.
Yeah. We tried, the Nordic group has earlier started making a discussion paper about market communication and PEF, and therefore I would like to ask Torben Clausen to come and present this work. And he will speak about what are the ways forward if we want PEF to result in changed consumer behavior and a more green consumption. So please come forward.
Thank you very much, Gert, and thank you all of you who voted business to consumer, because I brought my business to consumer presentation, so that actually works out pretty well. So great voting, everyone. Now I'm gonna talk about impact in the real world, because what we have now, we have methodology for doing PEF profiles of products. We have a whole way of approaching how we can actually get a knowledge foundation in place, but that does not automatically lead to any communication to consumers, any business-to-business communication, and it does not even lead to any large-scale real-world impact, in my mind anyway. We need to think about how to approach communication. And as Gert said, I have prepared this paper together with Preben Christensen for the NEF group, and you can find it on the NEF group website if you want to read it. It's relatively short, so it has that going for it anyway. I think it's also really interesting. I will only pick out some pieces of it today and not go through all of it, in hope of lining up some discussion points that you might reflect on and use as a basis for posing some questions afterwards. But what we basically need to ensure is that communication help us move towards a greener consumption. So help consumers, help businesses make more informed choices, offer clear, reliable, and comparable information, and in the final instance, create an efficient market for environmental performance and a transparent and credible foundation for green purchase decisions. So all through this discussion, we need to have an end goal in mind, which is about having a level playing field for green claims, not having greenwashing, not having all sorts of labels out there which are more misleading than guiding both consumers and businesses. Is also about thinking really hard about how different stakeholders can use PEF data, PEF information to shape communication, because no matter how clever we feel we are in terms of communication, no matter how many labels or formats we can dream up in this room or in the circle of people involved in PEF, the only thing we know for sure is that the market can, over the time, develop something that is more interesting, more relevant, and we need to have an openness to allow PEF to be the basis for that. And then we need, in the final instance, to evaluate and see, do we actually get the effect? So I see this as the beginning of a journey. I'm a consultant, and that's what consultants always say. It's the beginning of a journey, but in this instance, I actually believe it's true. This is not about making firm decisions about how things will look in 10 or 20 years. It's about making the right decisions now to make sure that we actually move forward. And in terms of making decisions, in the paper we outline 3 strategic considerations that we believe are vital if we are to make not only decisions but smart decisions. It has to do with choice architecture, so how we can actually nudge consumers through the information that the PEF carries. It's about a value proposition that transforms this from a technical knowledge to something that actually contributes value to a consumer in a consumer situation, and it's about stakeholder support. It's about making sure that all the stakeholders out there are actually helping to magnify the messages or the information and the value that is found within PEF. So just a few short remarks around that. If we look at the information architecture, to understand what that's all about, I have this quote from the sociologist Cialdini, who says, "You and I exist in an extraordinarily complicated stimulus environment. To deal with it, we need shortcuts. We can't be expected to recognize and analyze all the aspects in each person, event, and situation we encounter in even one day." So I think even just sitting through this morning's discussions, we can all agree that we are in an extraordinarily complicated environment of information when we talk about PEF. I feel that way anyway. So giving consumers shortcuts, actually making this something that you can work with when you're running around the supermarket looking for a liter of milk, that's very important if we want PEF to be active out there. And as we saw in this room anyway, most of you believe that that's what we should be aiming for, a business-to-consumer situation. And we already have some knowledge about what actually works in that situation. What is a way to present information that actually help us make a choice? We all in this room know the Nordic ecolabel, which has a number of things going for it. It's well known, established over a number of years, but firstly I would highlight that it is a very simple and clear choice architecture. If you choose an ecolabel, you know that you get the top end, you know that you get the best-in-class products. It also, of course, has some drawbacks, meaning that it doesn't tell you anything. It can't contain a whole span of products. It can only communicate best in class. So in terms of what we in this paper call satisficing strategies, it has one dimension of it, which is if I want to be among the greenest consumers, I can go for ecolabels. But what if I just want to avoid the bad apples, the really polluting products? I don't get any help through that. So we have to look at these different solutions we have today and look at them in a nuanced way to find out what is the right way forward. I've shown you two other examples of how we can present information on products. We have the energy label to the bottom left, which is much more complicated. You have a scale that you can walk up and down until you find some position that satisfies you, and you can see if you're an A+ or an A++ type of person when you're shopping for a refrigerator or whatever. That has turned out to work quite well in the situation where we shop for appliances, make larger scale investments, but you also definitely put more strain on us as consumers. There's more we have to think about. Where is my optimization point on this scale with 7 levels? That's not as easy as it is with a best-in-class label. And of course, we also know that products already are very swamped with information, both commercial information, but also different types of nutritional information, etc. that has to be there. So we have to be very aware of the situation we're stepping into when we're talking about labels or information on products. And as Michele said this morning, all the research that has been done in connection with PEF shows that consumers want it simple. They want something that is easy to interpret and easily actionable. So that's the whole discussion of the information architecture. Then there's the value proposition. We have to present the benefits with a respect for the fact that as consumers, we have many different motivational drivers when we're in a purchasing situation. We might be interested in protecting the environment and the climate. So that's good. We have different environmental labels to help us do that. We might also be interested in save money. And we have other, actually, if we look at the energy label, we have a very good case where we can argue that this both helps the environment, but it also helps me to see that I can save. If I purchase a product with the lower consumption, I know that I can step into my basement or wherever I have my little meter, and I know it'll be going slower, and I'll be saving money each day if I choose this. So there we have a sort of a bundle of different motivations put together, which we should be very careful not to ignore when we talk about what is actually going to move consumers. Another case is the Nordic ecolabels, which have been very conscious of communicating that this is not just about the environment, if you'll excuse the language, but it's also about risk minimizing. It's about exposing your family to chemicals or other health hazards. So if you choose an ecolabel product, you choose something that's good for the environment, but also good for you and your family. So again, we have to be aware that there are different motivations. If we just if we try to reach end consumers only with a message about the environment, we might miss the mark. And finally, mobilizing stakeholder support. As it says on this slide, a modern consumer and business professional receives 30,000 messages every day. You must not ask me how I got that number, but it's very high, and I hope also convincing. It expresses a fundamental truth anyway, which is we are swamped with messages, swamped with information. So when we're in a room like this, we're all thinking about PEF and environmental footprints, etc. But as we know, that's not the case if we go out in the real world. We have a lot of other things on our mind, a lot of things going on that we have to respect. And that's one of the reasons why this broad stakeholder involvement, not just in developing criteria or developing PEFs, but also in the communication, is so important. I think one of the most illustrative cases of this is from the Nordic countries with the Englemark label that Coop introduced in 2006. And when this poll was done in Denmark in 2013, it turned up as the second most recognized label due to the major support it had gotten from the Coop retail chain. So that just goes to show what these large-scale market actors can actually achieve when they put their weight behind achieving something. So no matter what the solution that we come up with, this stakeholder engagement is crucial. So summing up, we need to help consumers make the right choice, and complex mandatory labels and other formats risk actually having an adverse effect. We need to present benefits in value propositions and motivations that are meeting consumers where they are and not where we are as people who are especially engaged in the environment. And we need to mobilize stakeholder support. So where does that lead us in terms of designing PEF communication? Again, if we turn back to this paper, we established this 4-level approach to PEF communication. And we do that both as a way to say this is what PEF communication could look like specifically, but also as an analytical approach to sort of distinguish between the different types or areas of communication, levels of communication that we need to address. First and foremost, there is the whole awareness of what is PEF and what is environmental profiles and how can I navigate this. So each time you introduce a label or like an eco-label or even a CE label, you send a signal and you tell a story, and you need to support it with all the messages around that, explaining what is this all about, what are we actually talking about here. And with PEF, we have a lot of information that we need to bring to the consumers. We need to get them to know how they can, what it's all about, how they can act on it. Also that it's been verified by third parties. Some of the research done for the PEF pilot project indicates that this information should be on a label. Maybe in the long term it's not necessary. But we need to have the discussion of how we can talk about what PEF is without talking about specific individual product necessarily. Because if people don't understand what we're talking about, then most other things just fly over their head. Then there's a second level. This is what usually takes up much of the energy, which I'm sure is also present in this room today, about how should PEF communication be designed in the future. And this is, of course, an example of a specific benchmark. You can put on a product, A, B, C, D, E. You can see what level is this product. And of course, this whole discussion is, would that be a step forward compared to what we have today with eco-labels? Would a 5-level benchmark be preferable to a 3-level benchmark? Again, if you download our paper, we have a discussion and considerations about that. And it is important, but just to stress once again that this is just one dimension of what we have to discuss when we make these decisions going forward. I think the research sponsored by the Commission has pointed to that this 5-level benchmark actually might be a good way to proceed. But I think it's as I said, we're in the beginning of a process finding out what this communication should be like. We're not at the end. Then we should, again, distinguish what we could call standardized claims, the whole verbalization of what the product characteristics actually are. For instance, this product is better for the climate, or this product is less bad for the climate, or this product is better than so many other products for the climate. The whole verbalization of what is actual environmental profile is not a trivial issue. And it's worth a discussion to see how much could we standardize these kinds of claims so the consumers will know them and be able to recognize them. And so we sort of have again a level playing field, clear decisions on what we can and cannot say when it comes to different products within different product categories. And then, sorry, we have the fourth level, which we call other claims supported by data. So this is all the communication that goes around or that sort of envelops these more narrowly defined elements. You see the first three elements. That could be the building blocks of a future PEF label. You could conceive of that. But no matter what you do, no matter how you think about a label or don't want a label, around that there'll be a lot of communication done by stakeholders, done by businesses, in marketing, on their web pages, etc., where they talk about their products, talk about the benefits. And you also have other stakeholders, you have consumer agencies doing tests, you have NGOs trying to promote different kind of consumption. And all these other claims are taking place around products. They will continue to take place around products. The more they can be supported by PEF data, the more, the higher, the better the level of discourse, you might even say. The more the consumers are actually guided. So this way of approaching PEF communication is our way of saying that we need to look broader than just a label, yes or no, or should it be ecolabels, etc. We need to actually be quite precise in what we feel should be carried in what media, by which type of stakeholders and actors, etc. And this leads me to sort of trying to answer the question that was posed in the short blurb for this talk. So ways going forward. And I put them up in this diagram where you can see. I think one of the key decisions that have to be made has to do with participation. So would it be voluntary to have a PEF to bring a product to market in the future, or would it be mandatory? And the other dimension, how much would communication be regulated and put into fixed formats, and how much would it be open, free for stakeholders to design and do their own communication? And in the bottom left corner with the voluntary and open communication, I've called that the pluralistic approach. So businesses design and drive their own schemes, multiple labels and claims proliferate. We know what that looks like because that's very much the situation we have today. And I put perhaps a bit provocative, product claims are hard to assess and verify, as PEF would be one among many. That's my way of saying that if we don't actually make clear what is the way ahead, how do we wish PEF to be used in communication, I believe there's a risk that there will just be one methodology, one way of doing things that will be swarmed out by all types of global commercial actors talking about sustainability and continue talking about sustainability and product environmental footprints in their own way. So you might say that's not a great way to build value on top of all the work that's been done for the last very many number of years to develop the methodology. The bottom right, you could call the best-in-class approach. And one way to address that would be to say that it's fair to say that participation is voluntary. You don't have to have a PEF, you don't have to communicate. But if you want to make environmental claims in regards to your product, then you have to do a PEF and you have to present it. So that would, in my mind, be one way of going forward, where you could say that that it would be very much up to the people who want to push ahead and drive the field, the businesses who want to be ahead, and the ones who want to also develop how we can best communicate this in the future. But it also means that only the best in class will be likely to participate, because you won't find many businesses probably who will voluntarily register a product to have a PEF, so you can go out and talk about how awful it is for the environment. That would be an interesting use of resources anyway. So to my mind, that would be a strategy and an approach to looking at how could we integrate PEF communication with the existing type 1 ecolabels. How could we have the Swan and the flower, etc. And PEF meet each other at some point where these are not different systems that leave consumers flabbergasted, but actually are integrated and support each other. but still as a best-in-class approach. Another way of moving would be going upwards. So looking at mandatory participation. That would entail that products must have a PEF, but businesses are free to design the communication. This, in my mind, is also an interesting place to look for the value that PEF can create, because it means that we set up a system that is much more stakeholder-driven and much more innovation-focused, because we make sure that every product out there has a PEF and every stakeholder out there is free to communicate. So just as businesses are free to communicate their PEF if they wish to, so all other types of stakeholders, including environmental NGOs, consumer agencies, etc., are free to communicate what are the strengths and benefits. So that will create a much more open, or you might say market-based situation, where different actors could experiment and work with different ways of communicating PEF, and we can see in the long run what actually turns out to work. What does consumers respond to? I think that's an interesting way to go, because it really talks to the stakeholder engagement part of it without locking anything in fixed communication formats right now, and it definitely supports more value creation for businesses like Colruyt, who's doing a lot to actually bring this to consumers and trying to tell the stories around footprint data. So I think that's an interesting venue to explore as well. And this could be, in my mind, a long-term solution for where we're going to go. But it could also be a stepping stone, and I think most likely a stepping stone towards what we would see as mandatory participation in a standardized communication regime at some point in time. And this is also the vision that we lay out in this paper. We say, well, if we have this PEF methodology, if we make sure we have a profile for every product, we sure have a level playing field, we sure have a lot of stakeholder engagement. Would we not also end up with some sort of PEF label to organize this communication? I don't have the answer, but I think it's a credible part of a vision that's where we want to go, or that's where we're going to end up, no matter if we want to go there or not. So what it's about is basically all products must have and present a PEF, but it also raises a lot of questions about the centralized label design, what's the value proposition, our standard claims, etc., etc. And I'm not sure we are quite ready to answer these questions right now. I'm very sure from what Michele Galattola said this morning that he's not ready to answer these questions just now. So I think it's not productive to try to answer this question right now. Do we want this approach? I think it's much more fruitful to discuss these other two venues. Do we want to work toward more standardized communication within a voluntary framework, or do we want to work toward more open, free, data-based communication, but within mandatory participation scheme? And just to give you some examples of why this open data approach, in my mind, is interesting, it opens the way for all sorts of communication that PEF really can boost. It can relate to the strategic branding initiatives you can take as a company to present your individual profiles on areas that are important to you. So if it's important to you to talk about water usage, you can talk about water usage. Of course, you have to respect your PFCR. So if it's established that a specific impact category has no bearing for your product category at all, of course, you shouldn't be able to talk about that as a special strength for your product. But this gives a level of freedom to talk about the environmental indicators that you believe are important to your target groups or to your customers. We can see retail campaigns using this data. We can see supermarkets having campaigns where they aggregate your purchases over a period and communicate back to you suggestions for how you could increase your green consumption, etc. Different types of knowledge product could draw on this data and communicate to consumers in all sorts of ways that we probably can't even imagine right now. And this whole communicative sphere is developing rapidly with the digital options. So a lot of things are going on right now that will shape this, and this communicative landscape will probably look different in a few years. So just to round up, right now, I think if we want to move all the way to the end goal with efficient product environmental footprint communication and consumers using it to make purchase decisions, there are a lot of building blocks along the way, a lot of steps we need to take, and Of course, we've also outlined what we see as key of those in this paper. Right now, I'd just like to say 3 things that I believe are important when we leave this room this afternoon. If we want to move PEF communication forward in the current situation, with the pilots rounding up and the next phase sort of intermediate, you might say. So we need a long-term commitment from Nordic authorities. I believe that's very crucial if we want the Nordic countries to carry this forward and help actually shape the next phase of what would PEF communication look like. So I think there's a risk that all the energy that has been mobilized for the last many years, that it won't be carried forward unless there's clear government support in that respect. Then I think there's also a need for different stakeholders to experiment, test and learn. I think it would be really relevant for everyone to come together in the realization that we don't have to decide on what would a future label look like right now. We have to decide that we actually want to test the potentials of this methodology. What can it bring us that we don't have today, both from the business side, from the NGO side, etc. I think that would be the right approach to take in this situation. And this also goes with an increased effort to raise awareness and set the agenda. So spread the knowledge. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Torben, for giving us an insight in the various aspects about the application of PEF information in the future. Now I will ask Ari Heikkinen to come to the floor and tell us about the findings, some of the findings from a Nordic project where we're looking about how can PEF and the ecolabel criteria development go hand in hand, or if they can't, I don't know. Yeah. We will hear now. Yes. Welcome, Ari.
Thank you, Gert. And again, hello to everybody. So this is about PEF and type 1 ecolabels. And the type 1 ecolabels mean that they are voluntary ecolabels showing the ecologically best products. And there is an organization that manages the system, and companies apply for the label, and then if they fulfill the criteria, they can get the label. I also tell about our SkePEF project very shortly. But first I come from Finnish Environment Institute. It's the Finnish Environmental Protection Agency, but mostly a research organization nowadays. Sorry. So I first tell about background and motivation, then about comparison of Swan ecolabel and PEF, about the processes in them, then some similarities and differences, just some key ones, not all. There are so many details. And then a case study for where we compared PEF and Swan. Then some conclusions, and at the end, some other results of this SkePEF project. And for comparing Swan and PEF, we have made 2 reports. The first one, it's focused on product environmental information, and the second one is about the workshop we had here in Helsinki in April 2017. There were Swan experts and life cycle assessment experts discussing together about product environmental information. And why we are here today? We need eco-design. We need better products, we need better services. Consumers need it, companies need, markets need, the whole society needs. We have these environmental problems and they are not going away. We have to find good solutions. So what can companies do? You can perform life cycle assessment or PEF and find those stages and aspects that are most acute to find solutions to decrease the environmental impacts. A good way is to take type 1 eco-label, look at the criteria and benchmark your products to these criteria. And I have been coordinating 2 product panels in Finland about textiles and furniture, and I know that companies do this. Even if they don't apply for the label, they use the criteria. And then there are plenty of other eco-design tools. And next, show the results and get competitive benefit at the market. And so far, type 1 eco-labels have been the most clear way to show that this is ecologically sound product. And what's next, what's coming, I would bet that future legislation will be stricter, and then you can get benefit being early and finding how to make your product environmentally sound one. About those processes of Swan and BEF. So at the left side, you see the Swan eco-label. First, when the principles and processes are established, there is an RPS guide which is used to find the hotspots, what to look at, and also the principles and how to do this analysis. And when looking at BEF, there is BEF guidance report. Then you identify the life cycle hotspots, and at the Swan eco-label you have background documents and tools like MECO assessment. It looks out for material, energy, and so on. And then for BEF, you have these BEF pilot screening reports. You produce screening report to see what's the most important environmental aspects for this product group. And then finally, you have this product group specific requirements. You have the criteria documents for eco-label, and you have BEF category rules for product environmental footprint. And for eco-label, now the companies can use those criteria documents, benchmark their products, and apply for an eco-label. And if they are doing BEF, they follow these BEF category rules for the product group and then make a BEF study. That's a very simplified figure, but anyway. And now about similarities, it's clear that both schemes aim to steer the market towards greener products. And Swan eco-label, it sets a level, a performance level, and the product must go above, be better. And then BEF, it provides a profile of performance, kind of eco-profile, what are the quantitative environmental impacts. And both focus very much on the quality of data. Swan requires supply chain specific data from the applicants. And BEF, there is the system how to assess the goodness of the data sets. And both look for verification. But then differences. Life cycle approach is different, so that Swan applies. It has a life cycle perspective. And it uses that philosophy when setting criteria to identify those hotspots, and those readily available life cycle assessments have always been used to find these hotspots. And BEF, it is a life cycle assessment tool. So, and one big difference is that the role of qualitative data is different. One uses both quantitative data and qualitative non-quantifiable information. And BEF, well, there must be numbers for BEF. It uses that kind of information, but on additional information, there is a part, additional information, where also qualitative information can be given. So, saying it shortly, for BEF, there is the method, and there is the participation. A lot of companies, a lot of stakeholders involved in developing these BEF category rules. And for type 1 eco-labels, there is expertise, experience, there is a long history of collecting knowledge about different products and services. There is the process, how you define ecolabel criteria. Actually, these stages of the process, they are defined in a standard, international ISO standard, ISO 14024, which was actually, there is a fresh version from this year about this. And a lot of stakeholders are involved, and there is open consultation about these criteria. And we know for Swan that it's well-recognized brand among consumers and companies in Nordic countries, and also consumers have confidence for that. So we made this case study comparing Swan and PEF, and found we look at textiles, rechargeable batteries, and intermediate paper. Look at both the PEF category rules for this product group and Swan criteria documents. And first, at unit of analysis, you can already see if textiles or T-shirts. It's T-shirts for PEF and textiles for Swan. So the unit of analysis is often quite different, or Swan may have a broader product group often than PEF has. Then these environmental impact categories, which you can see there is much difference in that. One big thing which has been stressed in ecolabel is chemicals. And for PEF, the methods are still developing. And also, when looking at life cycle stages, actually there is not so much difference, but anyway some differences. And actually there is behind differences you can also find some logic. So there are reasons for the differences. Now looking at possible synergies, there really are such possibilities, so that from ecolabels, LCA and PEF, they can see what hotspots ecolabels have identified. And especially those ones which are qualitative, you can give in PEF category rules as additional information, like forest sustainability certification. And at the same time, ecolabels could use PEF information. Use, for example, good PEF value as a criterion in the ecolabel criteria set. When you have the different ecolabel criteria, there are plenty of them. Use also information about PEF there. And also, in the PEF methodology, there is an average product. It's defined using different kind of data. So you can take that from the PEF side. Then also, it would be very important to recognize each other, discuss, cooperate, and campaign together about sustainable consumption. These have the same aim, these tools. So some conclusions. Both schemes aim to steer the market for green products. And LCA information has been used for a long time in the development of ecolabel criteria. And now, this is the most important message now. It's very important that there will be no major disagreeing results, so that PEF and ecolabels would identify very different products as the environmentally sound ones. The other system would say that these are the ecologically sound products. The other system would say that these are the ones. Because then it would destroy the confidence in both systems. And imply that there are serious problems in defining sustainable products, of course. Coming back to the previous slide, it's important that there's discussion and taking care that there will be no major different results. I think it's very important. Then coming to this SCEPEF project, you can easily find information about this in internet. The address is there. And I already told about 2 reports which were as the background for this presentation. Then we have also analyzed how ecolabels, Swan ecolabel has, through the criteria, extended product lifetimes. How those criteria can extend product lifetime, product service times. Also, circular economy and the Nordic Swan ecolabel, we had an analysis how those criteria promote circular economy, and it's clear that ecolabel criteria, those that look at product durability, recyclability, and so on, they really have good impacts for circular economy and increased product lifetimes. Lifetimes have potential for that. And at the same net site, you can see also other interesting publications and presentations. So please visit that, and it would be nice if you send some email and we could discuss these topics. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ari, for this interesting presentation about the possibilities of integrating PEF and ecolabel. Now we are going to have a very interesting presentation about and an example about what can stakeholders do if they want to use the PEF methods that are already available. I have heard some people talking about the PEF label as it is existing. It's not existing. It has not been making any legislative initiative about what to do with PEF from the Commission side. It is what we are waiting at and what we are hoping to see in the future. But in the meantime, people can use the methodology that is already available. And this is an example from that is called Made Green in Italy. And it is Nicoletta Frasetti Leon. Welcome. She comes from the Ministry of Environment. And yes, I've still another thing. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the organizer for the invitation. I'm here to present a new national voluntary scheme for environmental qualification of product called Made Green in Italy, and I will focus more on the communication aspect, according to the theme of the session, and less on the technical details that are actually pretty complex. So I apologize already to the LCA's experts in the audience, because I'm not that young, but I'm pretty young on the subject. So I would like, before to start, to go to the information on the Made Green in Italy scheme, to give you some background on the Italian context on the environmental footprint, because actually the Italian Ministry for the Environment since 2010 launched a program on this issue in order to involve the private sector in the commitments on emission reduction. It was we were focusing on the sector that were not involved in the Kyoto Protocol commitments. So this initiative involved Made in Italy leaders like, just to give you some example, Lavazza or Benetton, and small, medium enterprises and public administration. Since it was a program that lasted around 5 years, we can give some results and numbers. So the program was able to reach over 200 subjects among companies, municipalities, and universities, involving several sectors of the economy. Basically, it was a large-scale test with multi-criteria approach and life cycle approach, and the analysis focused mainly, but not only, on carbon footprint, taking into account all the existing methodologies. The aim was a double aim to reach the production, the private sector and the production process, so implementing carbon management measures and low carbon technologies. And on the other hand, we wanted to reach consumers, so we worked and developed guidance for a better, transparent, clear communication on the subject. And we had an overall aim to disseminate know-how and good practices, so we were used to organize conferences and workshops on this subject with, of course, the overall aim to spread sustainability, consumption and production patterns. This program went through different steps, started with a voluntary program with agreements between the Ministry for the Environment and companies that were signing agreements, and we had also to call for co-funding in order to promote this tool in the small and medium enterprises. And now we are at the last part of the process in the step forward. In 2015, indeed, there was a law that established the new scheme. I'm going to address it now. And from 2015 till 2018, so this year, there was a long process of drafting the regulation about the functioning of the MGI. So here we are. This is the Made Green in Italy. I'm sorry. This is the Made Green in Italy scheme, and this is the logo. So it's a national voluntary scheme for environmental qualification of products. It was established by a law that was actually containing different measures to promote green economy and reduce the use of natural resources. So Made Green in Italy was one of those measures. The scheme adopts the PEF methodology, so according to the European Commission recommendation and the following guidance. So I want to stress here that Italy is the first partner among European countries that actually took the recommendation into a national law. And the enforcing regulation, as I already said, has been drafted by the Ministry for the Environment. So we have the three main pillars of this scheme. It's voluntary, it's PEF-based, and the program operator will be the Ministry for the Environment. So the main principles. First of all, who can apply to MGI is applicable on products, so it's not about organization. Goods and services that have their origin in Italy as defined by the EU regulation. This means that products that are wholly produced in Italy can apply, but also products that involve more countries in their production, but the last substantial part of the processing went through in Italy. How it works? Well, in order to apply for the Made Green in Italy scheme and so logo, to gain the logo on the product, it needs to exist a product category rule for that specific product category. As I said, the scheme is based on PEF methodology. This means that those PEF-CRs, if those PCR, if a PEF-CR does exist, needs to include it beside the other additional requirement of the schemes. If a PEF-CR does not exist, it's possible to develop a national PCR. In both cases, we ask that the proposal arrive from a subject, private or public, that represent more than the 50% of the market of that specific product. This is because since they are the rule of the game, they have to be the more, there has to be the more consensus as possible. We also foresee this PCR has also to go through a public consultation before being adopted by the program operator, that is always the Ministry for the Environment. So the second step, when the PCR are available, is that a company can apply and send a request to join the scheme for its products. So completing a PEF study, they can obtain the MGI logo to be placed on products. I will go back to this afterwards with some more details. But why we have done it, or better, what we do expect. On the producer side, the MGI is meant to stimulate continuous improvement and optimize energy consumption, especially when you are not in, I will tell you afterwards a bit more in detail, when you are not in the benchmark, or you're not better than the benchmark, they are foreseeing this continuous improvement. And this is, the aim is to improve the competitiveness on the market on sustainable manufacturing and eco-innovation in a circular economy perspective. On the consumer side, we wanted to strengthen communication about green products and encourage more well-informed choices. And I will go back to this in a second. So the scheme is providing detailed declaration and position against the benchmark and the main impacts to consumers. So these are the two aspects, the incentive to producers and the communication to consumers. About the producers, sorry, I give you some information here about the benchmark. So the quantification of the environmental performance shall be based on a full PEF compliance study verified and validated by an accredited independent body. The PCR, so the scheme, foresee 3 classes of performance on the main 3 impacts. So you have 3 scores, better than benchmark, into the benchmark, or worse than benchmark, and only the 2 first categories could get the MGI logo. In the second case, in the class B, you have to commit to substantially improve performances. The products in class C do not receive the logo. This is mean basically that MGI should be given only to products that are actually good, have actually good environmental performances. So this is, this is the point that led us to the communication part. Yeah, I just put some statistics on confidence on environmental claims by consumers. Apparently, on the one hand, we assist to a proliferation of green claims that consumers do not perceive as clear or trustable, but on the other hand, it seems that consumers still would like to find information on environmental performance on the label on products. So in this venue, it seems that we get some good points, at least in theory or potentially, on our MGI scheme, because on the one hand, we have an easy to recognize logo that is assigned on products. There is no data, no numbers. It's easy to understand. It's trustable because it's a public institution behind it. And on the other hand, we provide through a barcode or a QR code detailed declaration that are providing better and transparent information, so consumers and stakeholders can actually check compliance and find information on main data. First of all, the 3 main impacts category, the position against the benchmark, the continuous improvement when required, and the compliance with national GPP mandatory criteria when applicable, because this is something that I didn't mention. On the additional requirement, it's possible to have also the GPP criteria in the PCR of the scheme. Lastly, this should foster sound competition and more sustainable solution through direct access to the product-related information. So this is what we expect. And lastly, but not less important, the MGI would provide a real test of implementing the communication of PEF studies. So we expect that at least in theory and at the communication part, we could meet the minimum requirement on providing product sustainability information that are clarity, transparency, accessibility, relevance, comparability, and reliability, as at least that is the requirement we find in the guidelines from UN Environment and from EU. So we actually need to still pass the test of the implementation of the MGI, and it's actually a lot on the hand of the market, since as a voluntary scheme, it depends a lot on the voluntary commitment and the real interest in this kind of scheme, but we are kind of confident because we are receiving a lot of inquiries. So I hope that maybe in 1 or 2 years I will be able to come here and tell you something about the results. For now, I just thank you and leave you my contacts and also the email of the MGI scheme, so you can send more inquiries and you can ask information on the technical aspects of the scheme. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Nicoletta. I think I would like to start with some of the questions for your presentation. And one of them, that is, and some of them goes hand in hand. One, can foreign product get the Made in Green Italy label, and how does it comply with this scheme of, that is such a scheme. There was another question. No, let's take that first. How can foreign produced product get Made in Italy Green label?
The third one?
Yeah, as I said, is a scheme that is meant to reach to be applied to Made in Italy products. This means that has to have, or they have to be wholly produced in Italy, but according to the regulation, you can say that a product is made in Italy also if the last part of its processing, justified and substantial part of the processing, is made in Italy. So if a product made outside but that meet this requirement can get the Made in Italy logo. I don't know if it was clear.
Then we have here a question: how does the MGI fit into the procurement directive, which says that labels requested in procurement shall be open for all products? And there was another question which was similar: what does the World Trade Organization say about the MGI?
It's a voluntary scheme, so it's not. I don't think there is any conflict with the procurement directive. I saw maybe some question on what we are what the Made Green in Italy would do when PEF, at European level there will be some changes yeah. Of course, we are going to adjust our scheme, because actually something that I didn't mention, that also the PCR made at Italian level, whenever the PCR does not exist, would be adjusted and renewed when a PCR would exist. So actually the idea is to go beside the European level decision making, of course, when they are available.
many questions now.
Yeah, there is a question also about what if product made outside Italy are performing better. When do you make the benchmark? Is that only Italian product you benchmark against, or is it you also take the product produced outside Italy into consideration when you are making the benchmark for this scheme?
But the benchmark is based on PEF study, so if there is a PEF CR available, the benchmark would be the European one. If a European product perform better, they can just communicate it, but it's not. The scheme is foreseen for. It's called Made Green in Italy, so it's actually a measure to promote the green products that are made in Italy. It's a competitiveness tool, so it's not that it's not in conflict with the PEF requirements, since we are taking into account the benchmark that are developed at the European level when available.
Then there were a few questions that were similar. They were about the difference between the Nordic Swan and Made Green in Italy, other than that Made Green in Italy is about perhaps being made in Italy. Is there a fundamental difference, and what if the results are different from these two methods?
Well, I think there can be said as pretty similar, even though probably Nordic Swan is more level of type 1, while our is more a mix between the 1 and the 3. And maybe you want to add more on the Nordic Swan.
Well, it seems that it's the same. It's the difference between PEF and Swan. PEF and ecolabels, as you are following PEF. So they are different.
Many questions. Could you take one more related?
Which one?
The last one.
The last one?
Yes, yeah. Yes, the last one. How are the product classified into A, B, and C on the main certain impact we prioritize over other?
Yeah, the MGI is based on the PEF methodology, and on the guidelines. So the benchmark is developed in this venue, and this means that the benchmark is made by the 3 main impact categories. So it's the sum of the 3 main impact categories, and this is something that is developed at the PCR level. So in each PCR, you would have they would indicate the first 3 main categories, and those would be the point to make the benchmark, so to do the classes.
Yeah, I have a question about if you want to make a label for a product that is not already a product category rule for, what are you doing then?
Yeah, you should go to your competitor or to the most likely the category association to see if there is interest in the market to develop a PCR. This is what we expect, and it's actually what is happening. That if normally this could be a company that is more interested or more aware of what is is happening and what is the environmental footprint. For instance, since we have the program that already spread this tool, we have a lot of companies that already participated to the program that are actually moving to reach their partners and speak with them and try to see if there is interest to develop the PCR. It's more or less the same that is happening, well, in the case of the Commission, the PEF at European level, it was the Commission opening a call. In this case, it's something that is more bottom-up, that is the market and the companies that are supposed to bring together their will to do so.
Thank you. I would ask out in the audience here, is there some specific questions here that you want to have raised directly, or just want to go on with them or coming on the screen? Okay, have one, yeah, please.
Thank you. Sylvain Chevassus from the French Environment Ministry. I just have a quick clarification question to Ari. Thank you for your presentation. You said in one of your last slides about the relation, the projects, the study you did on the relation between Nordic Swan and PEF or type 1 ecolabels. You said use good PEF value in type 1 ecolabels. Can you clarify? I'm not sure I understood that. And also I was wondering if you also mentioned another project on the relation of type 1 ecolabels with the circular economy and notably the lifetime of products. And I was wondering if this document is available, because it sounds really interesting. Thank you.
Yes, to your second question, the document is available at the net site. And regarding this good PEF value, it was also said in parentheses when there will be a benchmark system and a system for giving total score. It doesn't exist yet. So you don't have you can't have a one good PEF value yet. But there is work with normalization and weighting going on. Then I would like to come to this question, which is quite tricky. Could a product classified as hazardous for the environment or health get a positive PEF outcome? So I'm not so deep in doing actual PEF analysis, but I would say that when the toxicity impact classes are ready, I think they are next year, it would result in getting so bad value from those classes that you couldn't get a positive PEF value. But would you like to comment this?
How many hours?
Half a minute, please.
No, half a minute I will not reply. I mean, that's a very serious question. I cannot reply in half a minute. I think, yes, it is possible for very good reasons. The EU ecolabel and the Swan and the Angel are based, they look at toxicity from an hazard viewpoint for historical reasons. And they look at the toxicity of the product itself, the formulation basically, if you think about the detergents. And they measure toxicity with a certain approach, the critical dilution volume. In PEF, we look at toxicity with a method which is something in between hazard-based and risk-based, more towards the risk-based, because that is somehow how society is developing. And we don't strictly look at the toxicity of the formulation, which is taken into account, but we look at the potential risk factors along the entire supply chain. So the information that you get is different from the same information you would get for any ecolabel product. So the answer is yes, even with the new method, you might get products that have different scores for toxicity, and that is the reason. So the point is not much to put in competition one against the other, but to find a way to balance the two information because they relate to different parts of the life cycle of the product.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you. I think that we are at the end of this session and are going to the next. Unless there are more questions here, when we have used the time for this session. I will say thank you very much for the participation in this session.
Okay. Getting into the most tricky part of... He's making straight. Nah. Okay. We have a technical break of 5 minutes. I'm happy to stand up. It's waking me up. So we have 5 minutes technical break, so you're more than welcome to do that also. And I'm trying to locate our first keynote speaker.